everyone, and welcome back to Letting Go Like Jesus, a YouTube retreat. My name again is L.J. Malone, and I serve as the Director of Faith Formation at St. John the Baptist Catholic Church in Silver Spring, Maryland. Our topic for today's video is retraining our desire. Letting go retrains our desire. So we begin with a story. A disciple follows his teacher to a lake. The teacher wants to show the disciple what true devotion means. And so together they wade into the middle of the lake, and the teacher grabs the boy's head and plunges him underwater. And he holds him under until the boy starts to struggle and thrash about. Only after 2 minutes does the teacher let the boy up, and the boy exclaims, "You tried to kill me." But the teacher says, "No, if I'd wanted to do that, you wouldn't be here. Rather, I want to know what you felt underwater." And so the boy cries out, "Well, I was dying. I wanted to live. All I wanted to do was breathe." The teacher replies, "Exactly. True devotion only appears when you have but one desire, and you'll die if you don't get it." Letting go does not make us desire less. It liberates our desire for what will truly satisfy us, the holy mystery of God. And Jesus knows this, and that's why he gives us this first formula today. Where your treasure is, there also will your heart be. It's found in Matthew 6, verse 12, I believe, or verse 11. What Jesus is saying there is your focus determines your reality. Where your mind is, that's where your treasure will be. What you delight in, what you pay attention to, what you're occupied with will show what you become, will shape you into a certain kind of person. Your focus will show you what you become. In other words, what we pay attention to and what we desire will make us into a certain type of person and will, show us what we love. So Jesus is saying, if you focus on fear, you'll become fear. You'll see all of reality as threatening. You'll make others afraid. If you focus on money, you'll become greedy. And you'll see everything in terms of economic and buy and lose and buy and sell, win and lose scenarios. What you focus on, you become. Where the mind is, that's where the treasure is. So it's all about how we direct our attention and our intention. It's all about letting go in these terms. Retraining our desire for God. Shifting our intention, our desire to God. And away from those things that we get occupied with, that we pay attention to. What we have called in past videos, our attachments. So Jesus is inviting us to let go of our small desires and to seek, to intend, and to delight in God alone. To let go is to enjoy nothing but God. So we have to get in touch with our desire, with what we really want. Do we really hunger and yearn for God? Because unless we get in touch with this desire, we may not understand our second formula from Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. Now the key term there is the second one. Pray without ceasing. We will know joy. We will become grateful for all the gifts we receive when we pray. But praying without ceasing, it doesn't mean that we're saying prayers all day. It doesn't mean that we're thinking prayers all day. It means rather that we're living in an awareness of God's presence. Of course, it's really easy to forget God's presence. It's very easy to fall back into our small desires, to fall back into our self-preoccupied thinking and forget God. And so letting go here takes on a new dimension. It's about constantly, continuously bringing our hearts and our minds, bringing our attention and our intention back to God. Continuously back, continuously back. Brother Lawrence of the Resurrection, a Carmelite mystic, summarizes this for us when he says, the habit is formed by the repetition of acts, by constantly bringing the mind back into God's presence. Now, this kind of prayer that we're describing here, of living in an awareness of God's presence, it won't change us. This letting go won't change us unless it becomes the one thing necessary. Unless that we subtly intuit that the nothingness of letting go and of prayer is in fact everything. Because it will feel like it's nothing for us, because we are so accustomed to wanting things, to wanting people, to wanting experiences, where prayer and letting go will involve divesting ourselves of those very things. As Jesus says, remain in me as I remain in you. He's inviting us as well to this constant prayer, this constant letting go. Remaining in God's presence as much as we can throughout the day, that's the key to growing in holiness. That's the key to growing in letting go. And Jesus, of course, knew this. In his own life, he's always going off to pray, to deserted places, early in the morning, spending whole nights in communion with God on mountaintops and in the desert. He's always aware of God's presence. Sometimes he bursts forth into a spoken prayer right when in the middle of talking to somebody. And of course, he tells us in the Gospel of Luke, pray always without becoming weary. So to pray always, to let go in this way, it's to retrain our desire, because our desire is focused on tiny things. Hence our third formula. It comes from Abba Poman, a monk of the 4th century, like Evagrius from last week. Poman says, don't give your heart to that which will never satisfy your heart. Poman's concerned about our little, constricting, narrow desires and how they imprison our hearts, because our hearts are reserved for God alone. Our hearts have a great, grand, infinite desire for the infinite, the mystery that we call God. But our hearts settle for little things. And they settle for little things in the form of daily practices, and they come in the form of daily disappointments. We have to watch what we give our hearts to, because we're making our desire for God grow cold. It's cooling off. The heat of our desire for God cools off when we give our hearts to little things in the form of daily practices and in the form of little disappointments. So let's explore that for just a moment. A lot of what we do every day, playing video games, going shopping, watching movies or television, they shape our hearts. These practices that we do every day, they train our desires. They train our loves to focus on certain things. For instance, if we're always going shopping, if we're just shopping frequently, that trains our desire to look at reality in a certain way. It trains our desire to seek certain things. We'll see reality in terms of comparison and competition, in terms of buying and selling. We'll get pleasure from the act of consuming. Buying some shoes, buying some books, buying some clothes, whatever it is we want to buy, the very act of consuming something, of procuring a product, gives us a little joy. You know, it's shopping as therapy, as we've said before. That will shape our hearts to seek certain things. We'll settle for these little desires, these little pleasures of a therapeutic experience of shopping, or of competing for some good, or of comparing ourselves to some other person. These little desires imprison us, and they make our desire for God grow cold, just like our disappointments. It's so hard for us to let go when we're disappointed. It's so hard for us to pray when we're disappointed, when things don't go our way, when we don't get what we want. Those disappointments reveal just as much what our attachments are, what we're giving our hearts to over God, just as much as our daily practices reveal the same. So the remedy here is to be aware of what you give your heart to. To ask yourself, is my heart growing hard, growing cold, because of the things I'm doing every day, because they're shaping my love, they're shaping my desire for things that aren't the holy mystery of God? Are they focusing me on other things that will make me become a different kind of person, a person full of misery, full of sadness, full of anxiety? Jesus And St. Paul and Abba Poman are saying, let all of that go. And so our practice here is letting go. How can we nuance that? I suggest a very simple way. Breathe. Breathe deeply. Breathe with intention. Let every breath be a remembrance of God present. With every breath, let go of those little desires and breathe in God's holy presence. With every breath, become aware. Our breath is a wonderful doorway into just being aware. Because when we're saying be aware of God's presence isn't another thing to be aware of. It's just awareness. Awareness in faith. The breath can be a wonderful doorway into that awareness. And we're always breathing anyway. So why not let that breath be a doorway into the present moment, into awareness of God. But here's another practice. If you don't want to breathe, or breathe with intention, as we're saying, you can use a prayer sentence. And this is sort of a riff on something Eckhart Tolle teaches. It's a sentence that he uses that I modify a little bit. And it's, God, thanks for everything. I have no complaints about anything whatsoever. Again, that's God, thanks for everything. I have no complaints about anything whatsoever. Say that prayer sentence all the time. Say it when you're brushing your teeth. Say it when you're driving your car. Say it in your mind. Say it softly. Say it slowly. Say it gently. But say it all the time. That will constantly connect you to God's presence here and now. Will constantly help you let go of the various disappointments and the various attachments that surface throughout the day. So it's a good way to continuously bring your mind back into God's presence. The breath or your prayer sentence, good ways to bring your mind back into God's presence. So let's summarize. Here are our formulas. First, Jesus says, where your treasure is, there also will your heart be. St. Paul says, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. And Abba Poman says, do not give your heart to that which does not satisfy your heart. And then, of course, our main points today are to let go is to seek God alone. It's to enjoy nothing but God. We're still full of desire, but it's directed to the proper end, God. Second point, to let go is to retrain our desire, to refocus our desire on God. And our third point, to let go, is to continuously bring our mind and our hearts back into God's presence. And we can do that by our breath or by the prayer sentence, God, thanks for everything. I have no complaints about anything whatsoever. And in a short time, either practice, either way of letting go, you'll see changes emerge in your life. So again, thanks for watching. You can like this video, comment below, share it with friends on Facebook. It'd be greatly appreciated. And until next time, God bless.